Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Just want to give a quick disclaimer that this episode does contain spoilers for Far Cry 6, obviously. So, me being the kind person I am, I went ahead and outlined when the spoiler discussion starts and when it ends. At minute 40-second 30 is when we're going to start, and then it's going to end at 1 hour, 5 minutes, 43 seconds. That way you know where to skip if you still want to listen to the video. Thank you so much for supporting. Guys, enjoy the episode. Peace. Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to an episode of the Undesired and Prescribed podcast. I am Brown Sugar, aka Jared. Been a little bit of a hot minute, but, just really wanted to do a little Far Cry 6 review just because I've been... I played the crap out of that game recently, and I just really wanted to talk about it. So I just want to start off by saying that I thought it was a really good game. I would say it's a good game, not a really good game. Let me backtrack a little bit, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Ever since it came out, it was probably like the only game that I like really actually played. Like, don't get me wrong, obviously, like I played like other stuff in between, but for like 2 weeks straight or 3 weeks maybe. This is the game that I solely played. I got on just about every single day just to play it, even for the littlest of times, it seemed, just because I was very much enthralled by it. So now that I got that out of the way, might as well just jump right into it. Something else that I do want to clarify at the start of this video, after I go through what like a normal game review would have, I am going to do some story spoiler discussions because that factors into a big reason of why I gave this game the rating that it did, just because the more and more that I had time to marinate on the game, especially the story aspect of it, the more and more that I started to think that I don't like it as much as I do, but in the moment when I was playing the game, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and like I said, I still consider it a fairly good game, a good game at that. So just want to throw that out there. I'll give another disclaimer before I head into it. That way, if you are interested in hearing everything up until that, then you'll be fine, because everything here should be spoiler free. If I think that I might say something that's spoiler related, I'll do a little quick skip, like something I don't know, but or I probably just edit it out. Who knows? But so let's just jump right into it. So I played the game on my Xbox Series X. It was a technically sound game. I didn't come across any technical issues with Far Cry always has big maps. Far Cry 6 is not an exception. So the fact that I didn't have like any load times, rendering issues, texture pops, anything like that, I was actually surprised, which I usually don't let that affect my scores too much, just because I know it's an open world game and stuff like that doesn't necessarily matter to me that much unless it's something that continuously happens over and over and over again. But so I just want to point that out, that it was a technically sound game. I didn't come across any issues on my playthrough with it, nothing that broke the game. And as a matter of fact, there is the quick resume feature in the new Xbox Series X. And the quick resume feature on this works superbly. Never had any issues after so basically, if you're not familiar with the quick resume feature on Xbox, I can go and start playing another game, and then the quick resume will just pick back right where I left off on Far Cry, wherever I may have been. I literally could be in the middle of a mission, and it would just pick up and save. So that's why I want to say that, to me, this was a technically sound game from that standpoint. I do want to throw out, I'll go a little bit more in depth about this later, but I don't think the graphics were on par where they probably should have been, because I'm not saying that the graphics were bad, but a lot of the I guess a lot of the facial animations and how they did some of the faces is a little awkward, I would say, but I'll get into depth about that more later. Like I said, I played the heck out of this game. I clocked in easily 70 hours plus on the game. I obviously wasn't doing just straight story. I did a good portion of the side missions. I don't know what I would break the percentage down to if I said I've complete, if I was going through 100% completion for the game as it is right now, before DLC and all that stuff, I'd probably be sitting at, I don't know, maybe a 70% completion, I would think, at the very least. But So I want to jump into parts of the game that I like. So something that I really enjoyed about the game was the gun diversity. Mainly by that, just there's a lot of different guns in the game, and yeah, it feels like some guns are kind of just like copy and paste with obvious cosmetic tweaks. And I'm not even talking about like legendary guns, which those are in the game, and those are actually really cool to find. Some of them are really cool to find, but there's a lot of gun diversity, which I did like. And factoring into that gun diversity is going to be the new addition of Supremos in the game. Supremos are basically, you know, how every shooter has like an alt ability type now. Basically, there's a bunch of different Supremos that you can get with all various different ones. Something that kind of they did feel a little lackluster to me. There seemed to be like a big emphasis on them, but to me personally, it didn't seem like I didn't use a single Supremo aside from the one that they gave me at the start, and that was mainly because when you fight enemies for long periods of times, eventually, like tanks, helicopters, planes, they're when they come and fight you, and this specific Supremo had like heat-seeking rockets, and it was the very first one you got, so I didn't feel as if it was a requirement for me to use the other ones, mainly because I just like to be prepared, and as soon as I see a helicopter, plane, whatever, where I need some type of like heavy artillery and a heat-seeking to a degree, I'd rather just have it right then and there and not have to worry about it being like charged up again. So there were other Supremos in the game, but I'll be honest, I didn't use them. But so I guess the Supremos fell flat for me, but maybe I just didn't give it a fair chance. The legendary weapons in the game, like I said, very cool. I do like them a lot. It just depends. Some were cooler than others. Some were obviously better than others as well. But there's like a tier grading system, like a 1-star or 2-star. And then I think 4-star might have been the top weapons that you could get in the game. Not 100% sure on that aspect. But I felt I think the overall guns in the game were good, and most of them were different enough to where it felt like I was using different guns. Now, when they go back and do some DLC, if they add more guns, more attachments, I think that'd be cool. And then when I get to parts of the game that I'd like to change, I'll actually discuss the guns a little bit further. So it's kind of like there's an aspect to the gun diversity that I like very much, but then there's a part that falls flat, which I will talk about. Another aspect of the game that I really enjoyed was the violence. It was very crazy, in all honesty. I think in the very first like 20 minutes of the game, like you're still doing the prologue before you really get into the meat of the game. You are witness to like an old woman getting shot damn near point blank in the face by like a revolver or some shit, and I think that sets the tone very early for the game because there's a lot of very violent and graphic scenes in the game, and honestly, I was a big fan of it, and by a big fan of it, I wasn't like watching this old woman get shot in the face. I'm like, yeah! It was more so of like, this is kind of making me feel a little uncomfortable, just because they didn't do it a whole lot, but they did it enough to the point where I was like, it's a little uncomfy, but I like that they did that. So I wanted to point that out there. It does set the tone early on for how violent this game can get, and it's not like that the entire time, and it doesn't get super crazy. I mean, there's some parts that make you a little squeamish, but nothing too bad. But I thought the violence was done well enough to where I wanted to mention it, just because that's something that stood out to me. So for those of you that don't know, I work at GameStop, and so a lot of people come in and they'll ask me, oh, how's so-and-so game, like mostly like the most recently released games, and if I haven't played them, I don't tell them like on anything, but it was hard for me not to give Far Cry praise for the violence. That was usually like one of the first things that I told people, is like how crazy violent the game gets, and as soon as it starts off with that woman getting shot, that old lady getting shot in the face, like it keeps going. It keeps going, but like I said, it doesn't like always get up to that point where like old ladies are getting shot in the face like damn near point blank. And I just also want to mention that part wasn't like really like made as graphic as like what it could have been. Like it, like after she got shot in the face, she wasn't like shown again. It wasn't like showing like this big ass hole in this poor old woman's face or anything like that. So did just want to throw that out there. An aspect of the game that I really liked was the main character, Dani. When I did my playthrough, you have an option to play as a female or a male version. I had been seeing the advertisements for the female, so I picked her because it seemed like that's who I was meant to play as. That's what it feel like. I feel like Far Cry allowed you to pick, but it seemed like the game was... It seemed like you should have played the game as female Dani as opposed to male Dani, but I didn't play male Dani. I didn't know how much different the story is if you play as male Dani, or like the interactions with characters are. I wouldn't imagine it's too crazy because I would take a lot of different like changes in the dialogue. And for the most part, it seems like most people played as female Dani as well. So I felt like I made the right decision there playing as female Dani. But just her as a character, I liked her a lot. She was quite entertaining. Real easy to, I'd probably say, connect with. Just because she seems like a fairly normal person. She wasn't really like how any of the other characters in the game felt over the top. She just felt like a normal, like, down-to-earth person. She's actually, I'll actually bring her up again when I talk about things I changed, because I would have liked a little bit more development, but that involves some spoilers, so I'll just throw that out there now. I'll circle back to it later on when I start discussing the cons of the game. But just wanted to speak from the standpoint of just solely her as a character. I really enjoyed playing as her. You know, I felt like I owed it to her to make sure she saw the mission through. I always was rooting for her, and there weren't any times that I was rooting against her. But I'll save further stuff for Dani later on. The supporting characters in the game, most of them I found very interesting. A lot of them over the top, just like a typical Far Cry game. But I liked it a lot. Bicho, the Legends of 67, mainly El Tigre. I also like Esperanza, or Camila. I liked her a lot, but Esperanza is also her name too, of the Monteros. I liked her a lot. Juan, I love Juan a lot. Juan is it's a great character, very entertaining, very funny. I didn't care too much for like the side villains all that much, like the bosses that you have to beat leading up to the main antagonist, Anton Castillo, which honestly he's probably my favorite part of the game. Which, for those of you who don't know, Anton Castillo is, man, I should have probably started with some backstory of the game first before I just like went right into it, but oh well. But he's El Presidente of Yara, which Yara essentially is Cuba, I would say, because it's a Caribbean island. Yara is just basically Cuba, in my opinion, and Anton is Castro, essentially. But Anton was by far my favorite part of the game. His character, which is portrayed by Giancarlo Esposito. He plays Gus in Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, also Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian. So I feel as if most people recognize him. He just has the look and the verbiage to play a really good bad guy. I also thoroughly enjoyed his son Diego in the game. Diego was actually surprisingly one of the highlights of the game for me. I thought I typically in video games, I mainly because of movies, like, children feel like a distraction, something very, I don't know, just something that doesn't help the main character too much. And I'm not saying that Diego was like a big part in helping the main character or anything, but I enjoyed the scenes that he was in. I really enjoyed the dynamic between him and his father. At times, I won't lie, portions of their interactions didn't make the most sense to me, but the two of them and the relationship was just something that I genuinely like loved. When I was in my Xbox parties talking to my friends while I was playing the game, I would always turn this up and just mute my mic because I wanted to listen to see what he had to say. So he had such a commanding presence, Giancarlo did, especially if Diego was on the screen, which I think for the most part, every time that him and Diego showed up like everywhere together. So I like that a lot, but he really commanded the screen every time that he was on it. I just had to like stop and listen to what he had to say. That's just how much I really enjoyed the villain. I would definitely say that's a big reason for myself enjoying the game as much as I did. Moving on, I'm usually not a super big fan of open world games because open world games usually feel like they're big, wide open, but without a lot of meat, without a lot of substance. And that's usually why I don't gravitate to Far Cry games, because a lot of their open worlds don't feel as populated as I would like them to be. Now, granted, in previous games, if we're just going off like the main titles, like 3, 4, and 5, it makes more sense for this one to be populated because this is a whole country with people that live on various different islands, rural areas, suburban areas, cities. So this one definitely did a great job of making the map more lively, in my opinion, just because there's so many random events that were occurring. A lot of F&D soldiers. F&D soldiers are, by the way, the people that support Castillo, Anton. They're the army, essentially, but a lot of random events that occur that you can do or you can ignore if you choose to throughout the game. And I just felt like the map was like alive. It felt like this country was happening in real time. It was living, and even though I'm not like physically involved in everything or around when everything's happening, there's stuff that is still happening out there, and I just can't always like be a part of it or witness it. And I'm okay with that. I was okay with that. Like I said, not a super big fan of open worlds these days, just because a lot of them don't feel as alive as this. And that's another reason why I like this game as much as I did. Another aspect, this might be something mainly only for me, but I definitely want to talk about it just because I liked it so much. There was no skill tree in this Far Cry iteration. I don't know if they had took it out in Far Cry 5. I played Far Cry 5 a little bit, but I'm not sure if they... I'll be honest, I'm not sure if there was a skill tree in that one. I know there's not one in this one because I beat the game. So instead of like gaining abilities through leveling your character up that way, what you do is you find pieces of clothing that you can find in loot crates that are like all throughout the island, or when you complete quests, or even you can go to the few merchants in the game. Would have liked there to be a little bit more diversity with the merchants. But you can go to the merchants and purchase them. So there were 4 different articles of clothing. There was a helmet, shirt, pants, and boots. Oh, and gloves. So 5 articles of clothing. And each one offered a different skill. So I won't lie, as soon as I found the gloves that allowed me to use takedown, which takedown is basically pulling your machete out and just killing them in one-hit melees. As soon as I found the gloves that allowed me to do that on enemies that were aware of my presence, because you could only do takedowns if you were in stealth mode, and you couldn't do it from the front, but these gloves allow you to do it from the front and also while they're aware of you. So basically, I could just go and one-hit everybody. Granted, I'm still taking damage, so I can't just go run up and just stab every single person in the face. But that's just a little taste of that. I personally like that more because when I go through a game, instead of getting a bunch of useless skills just to get to the one that I really want, I'm able to go out and find that skill that I know I want. And I feel like it's more fair that way. If I'm able to go out and find the skill that I want, then I shouldn't be able to have all this other stuff at my disposal, because then you feel a little too OP by the end of the game. But regardless, I really do like that. I think this is a new feature. I didn't play New Dawn, so if it's something that was in there or maybe even introduced in Far Cry 5, I really don't know. So I did want to include that in case this is something that other people haven't heard of since they haven't played the game. But I really did enjoy that aspect of the game. Moving on to the last couple things that I liked about the game, the overall story was compelling. It's very important for story games to be compelling to me, because if it's not a good story, then I'm not going to keep playing. And for the most part, while playing the game, I was very satisfied, very much into the story. I kept wanting to fuel this fire of revolution to free this country from this fucking insane dictator. And then some of the people that I met along the way, it just felt like, wow, I really need to do this. So I would say overall the story is compelling. When I get to my story discussion later on, then obviously I'll have more to say about it. But I would say for what it is, I think the story is compelling, and I liked it a lot. I liked it a lot, and I think it's enough to keep just about anybody invested. And then something that I really enjoyed too were the treasure hunts. The treasure hunts in the game were very cool. I liked it a lot. I like the platforming that Far Cry utilized in this game with like the grappling hook and zip lines, especially. There was this one. It involved like a green skull, and I was in a cave, and I would have to go across the zip line, drop at the right time to use another zip line, and then as soon as I left that zip line, I would have to be quick enough to use my grapple. So there is a degree of platforming in the game, but I really enjoyed it because it's a first person, so it's kind of unique. But if platforming really isn't your style, then you can totally ignore the treasure hunts. The treasure hunts do give you some really good loot, especially in terms of some of the weapons, like the more rare weapons in the game you would find doing treasure hunts, and they're really good. But you can still find legendary and rare weapons without doing these treasure hunts too. They're just obviously not going to be as good of weapons as the other ones that you have to work for, and they're not even too hard either. Now, I'm not saying that they're just like super easy and every single person can get them. No, like you actually have to like go and do some degree of like searching and finding, but for what it is, I do enjoy it a lot, and I like it, and that's why it's something that I wanted to mention in my review for the game. Alright, and now hopping into things about the game that I would change, I just want to point out this is not the spoiler warning part. I can talk about stuff from the game here it's just from the game as a whole. Just want to point that out, not the part to skip yet if you want to skip the spoiler discussion, but so this is just stuff that are in the game that let's just get into it. So some things that I would change about the game is I already talked about is just the weapon customization, because every single gun had like the same exact like customization styles, like the same exact scopes, lasers, weapon perks, along with ammo types, because there were different ammo types like incendiary, explosive, poison, soft target rounds, armor piercing rounds, stuff like that. I was okay with every gun having like an armor piercing and a soft target rounds, but you know, maybe something like the incendiary rounds could have been saved for only shotguns and made a little bit easier to attain. I didn't think that the incendiary rounds were hard to obtain, but they were like the hardest one to obtain, because throughout the game you are able to collect materials, and they're very generous with the materials that they allow. But I just think that the weapon customization could have been done better, just so each weapon class felt unique. Like the assault rifles, you know, weren't just SMGs with longer range. Like I could put on unique weapon perks for assault rifles that I wouldn't be able to use with SMGs, shotguns, sniper rifles, stuff like that. That is the qualm that I have with the weapons, but I don't think it's not something that I considered a super big issue, but because after a while I would get bored with using like the same gun, so I was like, oh, I got this gun looks cool, let me go and try it. But generally, it just felt like I was putting the same weapon attachments on everything, just because some they would give you for free, so it was an easy install. So like a compensator, and then like a sniper scope for like just about all the sniper stuff like that. But I just thought that the weapon customization could have been done a little bit more detailed, because there are parts of the game, especially in the story, where there just seemed to be some shortcuts that I would have just really liked them to work on that just a little bit more. And although some of the set pieces of the game are quite astonishing and beautiful, the graphics as a whole, I would say, are lackluster. Like I said, I was playing on an Xbox Series X for this game. My monitor has the ability to run HDR and overclock it, but even with doing that, the graphics weren't as good as what they should have been. Especially, it's more so a lot with like the facial animations, especially with Anton. Like, Giancarlo Esposito, in my opinion, looked like a fucking alien, like an alien version of Giancarlo Esposito in the fucking game. It wasn't, it's not super bad or anything like it, but the graphics for what they were and what I was playing them at, and this game is optimized for the Xbox Series X, S, and the PlayStation 5, so it has the ability to run HDR, the top frame. It looked, a lot of the characters looked weird, and I would say that some of the color choices, I don't know, it felt lackluster and shouldn't have been what it was. Something else is the nonsensical AIs while in combat. I didn't play this game on the super hard difficulty or anything like that, and usually when I play my story games, I usually like to just like chill and just like relax and play, obviously with some degree of challenge. But you know, the AIs in this game, they would just challenge you as much as they could. They wouldn't stay in cover. They weren't very all that tactical. And I'm not saying that these guys needed to be, you know, like the Dark Souls type guys or like elite forces, but so there's like this wanted tracker or notoriety type thing, kind of like the stars in GTA. And like when you get wanted to the point of like, you know, like if you just go around and you start killing like every soldier possible, you'll get notoriety, or your wanted level all the way up to where, you know, they're sending the special forces after you. And the special forces, like, I would have liked to have like more sophisticated AI, but they're literally the same AI as the guys that are just charging you. They just have weapons that do, more damage and also just more armor. But so the nonsensical AIs, I really wish they did a little bit better job of there, but it's not something that affected me too much, but something that I can definitely see other people having an issue with, because if you're somebody that usually play games on hard settings, and if you didn't play this one on for some reason, you would probably breeze through this game fairly quick. Something else, these next two, I would say these next 1, 2, 3 points all fall into this next point. So, story shortcuts, not going to discuss them now. I'll discuss them a little bit later. I still have a few more things to say. But mainly so, there's just a lack of branching storyline options. Even though it felt like they set up for a couple of them at times in the stories, they weren't branching. Nothing had like lasting effects on anything, it seemed. I mean, there are stuff that have kind of lasting effects, but it's stuff that you don't control. These are like pieces of the story that happen just because they're going to happen regardless. Same goes true for the development of Dani. I don't think I want to say this one just because it might be a little bit of a spoiler, but so a lot of the stuff that I would change of this game, like I said, this is a fairly technically sound game. The gameplay is good, real easy to pick up. It's not overly hard or complex, but there's enough like customization. I don't even think I mentioned the resolver weapons either, like harpoon guns, nail guns. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this game that you can do, especially with vehicles, from helicopters, planes, tanks. I think it's definitely a fun game to play, and there's really not too many issues with it that I can think of when it comes just from the game itself alone, besides like the stuff that I had brought up. Now I want to talk about the history of the other Far Cry games, because this is only the second ever Far Cry game I ever completed. And it's just mainly my history with it, so people can kind of understand where I'm coming from and maybe why I give this game a high praise. Is because previous Far Cry games, the only Far Cry game I beat was Far Cry Primal, so not even the ones that I'm going to discuss, which are 3, 4, and 5. I started 3, I got maybe like a third of the way through it, and then just lost interest and stopped playing it. For 4, never even touched 4. I did think about picking up that game just so I can play the Yeti campaign, because that looked fucking cool. But I never ended up playing that one. And then I was very big hype for Far Cry 5, because when I saw the teaser trailer for it, it gave me the vibes of, oh my gosh, Far Cry in America where you're fighting Klansmen. That's what I thought it was going to be. It wasn't. It's fucking Montana cultists, black and white, but I thought we were going to be killing a bunch of racists, but that was slightly disappointing, but not the reason I put the game down. It's just, I just fell out of favor with it quick. Didn't really like it all that much. Felt like, and I'm not saying that Far Cry games have you doing different things every single time. It's just the side stuff in this game, in Far Cry 5, wasn't as interesting enough to me where I wanted to keep playing. So I eventually dropped that one. I know how it ends. I also know how the other ones end as well, but I was just saying that I think this would have been... I think that this Far Cry, in my opinion, has been my favorite, because the one that I beat was Primal, as I said. And that's kind of my history with Far Cry. So, I even told people before this game came out, it's like, I really think I am going to pick it up just because I think... I really like the actor who's in it, and this setting looks way more interesting to me than Montana did, than the Himalayas did for Far Cry 4, or the island of 3. Now, granted, I know that, 3 is an island, and so is 6, but Yara is a whole country, and they have various different... thing. It's like they have, like I said, they have rural land, they have suburban land, they have a city, they have a lot of different things in there. So I felt well diverse in the environments. I didn't feel like I was in the same environment over and over and over again. And then there's different stages of the story, different lands that you go through, because you're trying to unite everybody under this one revolution to overtake Anton. So obviously you explore these different parts, and then by exploring these different parts, it just feels fresh, not like you're in the same environment doing the same thing over and over again. Maybe you're doing the same thing over and over again, but it's in different environments, different set pieces. But there's plenty of filler stuff in there that breaks it up to where it doesn't feel as repetitive, which I also wanted to speak about what other people were saying about the game. On Metacritic, because I like Metacritic a lot, because it provides you with critic scores and then also what people are saying about it. So out of the Metacritic score, or the Metascore, is out of 100, and the Metascore landed at 75, which is a passing grade on Metacritic. It's a green grade, by the way. Just want to point that out. 75 out of 100, which is, I would say, a pretty good review. A lot of the critics liked it for what it is. And that's one reason that I like the game for what it is, because the game itself is just a good time. It's something that you just go on and play, and you don't necessarily have to... You shouldn't be... You don't have to expect, some otherworldly, game experience, like God of War, Last of Us, stuff like that. It's just, for what this game is, it's a really good game to just pick up and play, with a lot of different things to do, which is how the critics reviewed it. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, when it came to the user score is a 3.5, and a 3.5, this grading is on a 10-point scale. So the way that Metacritic works is users put their score for the game in on a 1 to 10 scale and why, and this one has an average of 3.5, which is bad. What I was more focused on what other people were saying about the game, saying that it was too boring, too repetitive, which I can definitely agree with. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again in a game, which, you know, Far Cry is no exception, it's definitely going to get boring. But I feel as if they weren't exploring the island as much as I was and just doing random stuff, then yeah, the game probably isn't going to be as good. It's going to feel boring. It's going to be repetitive. I think the thing that I wanted to focus on most that a lot of people were saying, oh, by the way, a lot of people were giving this game 0s out of 10 because there was no Italian dialogue. People were pissed of the lack of Italian dialogue because a lot of people in Italy bought this fucking game and there was no Italian translation, and they are pissed about it. Like, if you look up the user scores on Metacritic for this game, a lot of fucking people are going to be telling you, ooh, this has no Italian dialogue or translation. It fucking sucks. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I thought it was pretty funny. The main issue that a lot of people saw with the game is that it's too women-focused, that they didn't like how the revolution of this game is predominantly led by women, and like the main person that you fight for, her name is Clara, and obviously she's a woman. I never felt like the women, like the fact that they were women was the forefront of anything. So I genuinely don't understand people's qualm with this one. Just because I played the game, I played as female Dani. There's Camila. There was Camila and Carlos. There was Talia and Paolo. And then for the Legends, there was El Tigre, who's basically the leader of them, but then La Moral, which was led by 2 other girls. But even though that majority of them were, these factions were like led by women, or these groups were, it didn't feel like their sex was the forefront of why they were leading things. It didn't seem like that, oh, I'm a woman, so you need you're not taking me seriously or anything like that. I was like, no, it felt like the people that were in charge were respected because of their prior accomplishments and what they have done in the past. It's not like they're out here like screaming feminism. It didn't feel like feminism was the forefront of the game. So I truly just feel as if there's too many female main characters in the game, you're just going to upset a very certain demographic of gamers who feel as if because there are so many females in this game, it's saying that, oh, women need to be respected more. And I never once felt like that at all. The fact that Dani was a woman never, like I said, you can play this game as a male. The fact that Dani was a woman never felt like the main point of why she was crucial to the revolution, or why it was crucial to her success, or what drives her. You know, she has her own reasons for wanting to, you know, change Yara for the better. It's not because she's a woman. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a couple illusions of, like, you know, I can get into them later. There's a couple moments where they alluded to, like, women not being treated fairly, but that was in reference to the previous, because in this game series there's a revolution 67, and now there's a revolution all these years later now that Anton's in charge. So it was more so referenced back then and not so much happening in the present game. So I don't share that issue because, like I said, Clara, she is the leader of Viva Libertad, whatever. That's the group, by the way. And people gravitate and follow her because because of just who she is as a leader and what she stands for, not because she's a woman and, oh, I'm a woman, so I'm going to make Yara better for women. So I did want to discuss that, because if you did go look this game up on Metacritic, you're going to see those, and I don't think that's a fair statement for the game. If you disagree with me, though, I definitely want to hear why, because a lot of these reviews didn't go in depth. A lot of them just said, misogyny is at the forefront of why Yara is so bad. This is all LGBT driven, and I was like, wait, what the? I don't remember there being a gay character. Actually, I do remember there being a gay character, but he was like so minuscule and unimportant. I just don't share that issue at all. So I did feel I should throw that in there, because if you do look up reviews of this game on Metacritic, which that's the only site I did pull from, just because, like I said, I like the aspect of being able to read critics and user scores at the same time in one convenient spot. All right, but now moving into the spoiler discussion. So as I mentioned, I'm about to discuss the spoilers, so before I jump right into it, I'll give the people a little bit of time to skip before I jump into it. The reason that I wanted to discuss the spoilers in this video is because when I was thinking about what I would grade this game or rate it, like, out of 10, I was, like, thinking, like, quite high. I was, like, in the 8s, and whatnot. But the after thinking back on the story, it affected the grades enough to where I think this stuff needs to be discussed in my fucking review of the game. So, now we're getting into the story spoilers. So, in my opinion, the story killed too many characters, and they did it in ways to like raise the stakes. Like, oh, they killed Carlos, the patriarch of the Montero family, which he's the guy that you go to, and you're trying to appease him. That way you can get him to join you guys. So I can understand him dying, but then there's also El Tigre from the Legends, and then the second in command, I think her name was Chonko? I don't fucking know. But the girl with the pink hair from La Morale, and there's just, they killed two, and then also, it was, I forget his name. It was like Lita's like boyfriend, maybe Rico, Carlos, I don't know, something along those lines, but they just seem to kill so many characters that have been introduced and established just to raise the stakes and like make you hate like these like sub bosses even more, which I'm not against them killing them off, but that just seemed to be their only thing. And even when you're doing like Talia and Paulo, you're like led to believe that Talia is like dead after she gets like shot in the head. She eventually recovers, but I just really wasn't a fan of them killing off so many characters just for the sake of them raising the stakes. And they, like I said, they did it a handful of times, and they did it in violent ways, and they did make you like feel a little upset, but I did the El Tigre campaign last, so that was, he's the big, it's the admiral and the Canadian guy who's shipping out the Viviro, which is the cancer curing tobacco drug. Excuse me. It just didn't feel all that good, in my opinion. There's other ways to raise the stakes. Specifically for the Montero's part, I felt like because they made Carlos sick, so the fact that he was sick played no role at all in the game, because he eventually just gets killed trying to save his son, which is admirable, don't get me wrong, But what's the point of making him sick in the first place if we're not going to take that anywhere? It's just, oh, this made him sick and he's dying. Well, who cares, because he dies anyways. He literally gets blown up. But there's other ways to raise the stakes. As opposed to killing him, we could have done, because these are farmlands. And something that I liked is, so the sub-boss for that area is Anton's nephew. And he goes and visits Anton to tell him that, hey, I killed the leader of the Montero family, Carlos. And then he says, do you have any idea what you've done? People love that man, and you just made him a martyr. And, like, he had his son shoot him in the ass, which was funny. But there could have been other ways to raise the stakes, because if they are farmlands and people do respect him deeply, if they would have started, like, killing some of these farmers or burning their lands in the name and saying shit like, if Carlos Montero doesn't turn himself in, your people will continue to suffer for your actions. There are other ways to raise the stakes as opposed to just killing off, like, an integral character. Maybe not an integral character, but just characters in general. So that's something I didn't like. And now moving into the sub-bosses, so there was the bitch who made propaganda, the guy who made the Viviro, the doctor who made it. Then there's also his nephew, as we were just talking about, and then also the admiral and the Canadian guy. There was also another guy that I was feeling like was going to be a sub-boss. He was like the main general with like the fucking biotic leg. He never said anything, but he's like an old man. He's the guy that shot the old woman in the face. He's also the guy later in the game that's pulling out your fucking molar teeth. Ugh. I hated that scene. But yeah, there was no satisfying boss killings in this game, because let's see, you didn't kill the nephew. The Carlos daughter did that, which is understandable. That should have been her kill. For the propaganda lady, she was brutally murdered on national television by somebody else in a way that's not even, like, her death wasn't even satisfying. I was hoping that we didn't kill her, because I was like, she's literally just the propaganda woman. I don't see a point in killing her. I was hoping that we would just, like, place her under arrest or something, or, like, just capture her. But no, she gets brutally murdered on television. Granted, I did like the way that it was done. She did it by, like, invoking, like, by, like, purposely pissing this girl off, Talia to be exact. But it's just a common theme throughout. The only people that Dani kills as a character would be the guy that makes the Viviro, or that started the Viviro, and then also potentially the Canadian guy. The Canadian guy, you have the option of killing or not killing because of reasons, and then you also kill the admiral, but there is nothing built up about the admiral whatsoever, aside from, like, when she got a call from El Presidente and he was all like, do your job better or I'll fucking kill you. She was just like, hang those people higher. Like, there wasn't any real build up. There was no satisfying kills. And even the person that you would feel responsible for Dani's friend's death at the very beginning, which is the whole reason she even gets into, like, Libertad and wanting to change the world, is it's just Dani herself gets no satisfying killing. She doesn't even kill Anton in the end, which, he's like the big bad villain, but you don't even kill him. That's something that I wanted to talk about, and things about the game that I would change is I wrote down that there's not any satisfying kills for your character. And I felt that was especially true in the game. There's just nothing satisfying that your character did, like, to enact revenge. And I'm not saying that's what the game needed to be about or anything like that, but some payoff to the degree, especially when the guy was ripping your fucking molars out. I personally would have been very, very happy with killing him, because one, he pulled my molars out and was fucking me up after I got captured at a point in the story. But he shot that poor old woman in the face. He kills, he literally beats the shit out of Carlos, which is somebody you meet early on, with the butt of his fucking revolver to death. It's just, and then I also he was there on the boat when you shot he shot the old lady in the face, and also on that boat, your best friend Lita, who I consider to be your main reason for joining Libertad. That boat gets shot up, and Lita is killed by being shot up on that boat. I feel like we could have at least like tied him into that to some degree by just like showing him. It could have been his gun that shot and like killed her or some shit like that, and we could have killed him. But we don't even get to kill him. So there's just no satisfying deaths. No satisfying deaths. There's just no satisfying kills in the game. Because even if you elect to kill that Canadian guy, it's not a cutscene or anything like that. It just tells you leave the ship that you're on and swim back to shore or some shit like that. But I was like, no, fuck that. I pulled my pistol out and shot him once in the head, and he just died. That just didn't feel satisfying. Even though this guy was like doing some fucked up shit, and yeah, just no satisfying deaths. I also would have really enjoyed some Dani development too, some Dani character development, because when you first get infected with this Viviro, you get you have like these hallucinations, and it's like people that have died in your game that are blaming you for your death, saying. And even towards the end, it's alluded that, even though that you're doing a lot of good right now, there is this, like, a lot of characters were worried about Dani because it was like, you're a guerrilla and you just want to kill everybody, and you just want to fight for the sake of fighting. But there's nothing that ever is like a moment where Dani comes to terms with, I am a monster. I just want to do this to kill people that I feel have wronged me, or have taken so many people from me, or even like doing like a hero like switcheroo and is like, you know what? I'm not going to kill you, Anton. In the very end, I was hoping that we would go up, and instead of attempting to kill Anton, we would try to, because a lot of times it gets brought back to, like, the reason that Yara's in the middle of another revolution is because how the revolution ended last time, where they just killed the president and just did, like, free elections, and then eventually the place was war-torn and in turmoil. But I would have liked to see, because even Clara alluded to it, it's like, after just because he's out of office, and she didn't say kill him, after he's gone, Yara is not going to be perfect. It doesn't magically get better. We are going to have a big task ahead of us. But I would have liked to seen some maturity on their side to be I'm going to learn from the past mistakes of just killing you, because you find out that Anton's dad, well, I mean, it's not find out, it's not like a big reveal or anything, but like Anton's dad was the person in charge. He was El Presidente before, during the 67 revolution, which is why, when he gets in power, he basically becomes his dad. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and he has his son Diego, so it's likely to be if you go and kill, and I feel like that's what they're setting up for, is like you kill Anton and then Diego becomes the monster like years later, but that is not what happened. First of all, get to that in a little bit, but it would have been great to see, like, I don't know, some maturity in the story as opposed to just all that. I would have really liked the approach to, I want to arrest you, or at least been given the option. Like I said, branching storyline options in this game would have been amazing, like how in Far Cry 3, you can either choose to save your friends that you spend the whole game trying to save, or you can become this warrior and have sex with Citra, which, God, Citra's so fucking hot. But Yeah, I watched the ending for that game too. But regardless, there's just I would have really liked some branching storyline options there, especially with the ending, because the ending is what really got me. And why why I needed to talk about the story so much is because I felt just this overwhelming sadness at the end. I was on an Xbox party, and I was telling my friends while I beat the game, man, I beat this and I feel empty on the inside. Like, this wasn't like, I don't feel good about this ending. And I'll just say why. It's because when you're going up to the top of his tower, you know, you're there with the intent to kill him, but Diego is there. Diego is his 13-year-old son. Throughout points of the game, you create like a brother-sister like bond with Diego, which I did like. So you want to kill him. That's your goal. But protect Diego. And at one point in the game, I would probably say this is like the second point of the game where you're having a genuine heart-to-heart with Anton. And he's sick. He has leukemia, by the way. And he's going to die regardless, because the Viviro, which is a cancer-curing drug, has stopped working. But he's come to terms with the fact that he's going to die in his penthouse today, in like the next coming of moments. So he goes to hug his son Diego, and then he's talking to Dani. He's like, you will protect him from your revolution, from your friends, from your murderers, stuff like that. And he's showing like genuine concern for his son, it seemed. And it was like one of the first times in the game where it felt like he was being a sincere father. But then she's like, yes, I promise I will make sure that nothing happens to him. And it felt sincere because you know everything that happened between the two of them. So it felt sincere, and and I'm sure Diego felt it was sincere as well. But then he just says, lies. And then shoots Diego and his 13-year-old son. And they showed it. They shoot him. He shoots him in the chest, pulls out a fucking sickle, not a knife, a fucking sickle, and slits his own throat and dies. You don't even get to kill the main bad guy in the game, who's done so much fucked up shit to you, your friends, and so many people that you love. You don't even get to kill him or get the satisfaction of arresting him. And he kills his fucking son. And then by that point, not going to lie, it felt like at that point I was way more invested in Diego and Dani's relationship, and making sure that was at least came out unscathed. And not so much as like Yara, because Yara was going to be in a war-torn state still, regardless of Anton being president or not. So, but at least I could have this silver lining of, well, I at least saved Diego, him and I'm like going to take care of him, all that good shit. But no, he's fucking dead. Like, you do have like a little like sad like goodbye moment with him, and he tells you like a quote that's been throughout the whole game of, Dani, you're the lucky one. You survived the city being assaulted in the very first part of the game. You're the only person to survive getting off that boat when it was shot up, and all these other things. You're the lucky one, Dani. So that's told throughout, and that just didn't feel satisfying. And then all of the people that you've gathered up come together in this, and they're like, oh my fucking god, what happened? And I just really wasn't a fan of that ending. Now, if it was something like, if I got that ending because of the choices I made, then I would have been like, fuck, I need to go back and like replay this so I get the good ending. But no, that's just like the ending you get regardless, unless you do like, Far Cry is known for their secret endings, and the secret ending, so like I remember the ones for 4 and 5, and obviously this one. So in 4, pagan main bad guy, you just want to spread your mom's ashes. If you don't get up and leave like how the game tells you to do, and you just stay there and wait for him to come back, you spread your mom's ashes, and the game's over. Far Cry 5, Joseph Seed is like, just leave. Just walk away. And then if you refuse to handcuff him and you actually walk away, the game ends. And then in this one, after you do the intro, and you escape, and you clear the barges and you escape the blockaded island of Yara, you have the option to, Clara gives you the boat and says, you can take this to Miami if you want, or you can stay and fight. But you can take the boat. So those are the only two endings you can get. And I'm not going to count that as like a real ending. So it was just extremely disappointing that the game ended on such like a low note. It seems like, don't get me wrong, I understand there can't always be happy endings, but I'm a big fan of happy endings. And the fact that nothing about this was happy, like a lot of the people that you started the game with and grew close to in the game are dead, aside from like a few people. And yeah, it just overall, it really left a lot to be desired out of that ending. The ending is the thing that I wanted to talk about most, but as time went on, I thought about other aspects of the story that I would have also liked to see changed a little bit, because a lot of why Clara died has to do with Juan's recklessness in the end. I was even telling people, I was like, I don't trust Juan right now. Like, I feel like he's about to do something shady, and he just didn't do anything necessarily shady, but his actions resulted in Clara being dead and getting killed, and I didn't like that at all. It just seemed like really lazy writing. It also seemed like a really lazy ending too, by the way. It's just like shortcuts with the story. That's something I would change about the game. That was in my notes. I wanted to save it for the spoiler talk just because there's just so many ways that it felt like they set up so many interesting dynamics in the game that they never explored. Like at one point in the game, you're doing a mission for Juan, and it's a main mission, so you have to do it, where you're dropping off stolen shipments of Viviro to the CIA. I would have loved to see the CIA's involvement, and as opposed to having to like kill more people just to like raise the stakes, they could have had the CIA been like introduced, because like the CIA was embedded in Cuba, weren't they, to like some fucking degree in the 60s? Like that had to have been fucking missile crisis and shit. So there would be a good reason to believe that the CIA would be embedded here. I'm sure there's Yaran-born Americans or Yaran-born immigrated Americans, shit like that. And the CIA was there in the game. You don't physically meet any of them, but they're there, and you're dropping off their packages at certain points for them to come and pick up. So if they would have had more involvement, I think that would have made for a really interesting dynamic. The one that I specifically thought of was, so the Legends of 67 were people part of the original revolution, and then La Morale, those two are kind of like joined together, but like they have like different like ideas, because La Morale is way younger and way newer, obviously, wins by any means necessary, blah 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 blah. But then like the Legends are a lot more like tactical, sophisticated, want to like protect their people more so than just like going out and fighting for the sake of fighting. I think it would have been real cool to see, since this La Morale faction takes a lot more risk and they do a lot more stuff that isn't always agreed with everybody that's part of like the Libertad Revolution or the Legends, it would have been awesome to see them do something crazy, like where it resulted in like some CIA person getting killed, or I don't know, something to where the CIA had to intervene and you were forced to choose whether to help the CIA or La Morale. I thought that would have been a really interesting concept, and that would have done really well, especially with the part where I said it sucks that they don't have any branching storylines. The final bit of story spoiler, or I guess my own fantasy booking, would be the use of the American reporter. So in the propaganda portion of the game, when you're dealing with the propaganda bitch, she invites various reporters from other countries to come and view Viviro, see what it's about, learn about it, learn what they do, and how it's going to benefit the world, but how to obtain it too, because Viviro isn't being sent to any other country except for third worlds that essentially pledge to Anton's shit. So he's attempting some form of like world domination type deal, but basically he just wants people to agree with him. But the propaganda girl gets, the okay from the big boss man to invite these other reporters. That way they can talk about Viviro and spew their propaganda to the world. And there's an American reporter there. A lot of people are there. A lot of the reporters that are there are kind of just like sucking their dick, like, oh yeah. But the American reporter is asking like ball busting questions and is like outlining like this revolution and, you know, like what's going on. It's like, it's not surprising that all of this is happening considering you do this, this, and that. And then I honestly thought it seemed like that we're going to have to end up saving this girl because she's a bad bitch and she's not afraid to speak her mind and point out injustices that these people are causing. So I honestly thought that was going to be a major point going forward with this propaganda, with that specific storyline, but it ended up falling flat and doing nothing. But like I said, a lot of the stuff that I had left to talk about is just my own fantasy booking and how I felt like those mishaps or missteps in the story, or the shortcomings of the story, could have been corrected or, in my opinion, enhanced, honestly. Because, like I said, overall, the story is compelling. I enjoyed it, and I liked playing it. Anton Castillo and Diego, you know, really, really stole the show for me. I very much enjoyed playing as Danny. But the story did play a major factor into why I felt the game deserves my 7.4 out of 10. So it's an above average game. I would say it's a good game. I think it's definitely worth playing if you're a fan of story shooters, open world, and also like there's just a lot you can do in this game that I feel any like mainstream gamer would appreciate. I play a lot of different games, but this was just something that I genuinely look forward to coming home and playing so much. And I just thought the game itself was very good. Obviously, these shortcomings aren't enough to where I would say that you definitely shouldn't play this game, but I do recognize that this game isn't going to be for every single person. I just think it deserves a little bit of some love, especially from me, just because, you know, a lot of people are a little unsure about it. I also just really needed to talk about this game, so what better way to talk about it than give it a review. But everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate you guys listening. Go ahead and follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening to. Go ahead and continue to support my content. Otherwise, I'll never make it again. Just kidding. But I appreciate you guys this time so much, and I will see you when I see you. Until the next UP, take care, guys.